Yeah.
Welcome back to the Gridiron Expert, bringing you some of the best college football news, predictions, and analysis. There is only one bowl game this Monday, and it just so happens to be one of the weirdest. The Bad Boy Mowers Gasparilla Bowl between UCF and Marshall, two teams that had a somewhat disappointing year in 2019. And we'll start with UCF. The Knights going 9-3 this season. Not a bad mark at all. But considering that UCF was playing in a New Year's Six bowl game back in 2017 and 2018, and the fact that they were 28-1 prior to their loss against Pittsburgh earlier in September, ended up being kind of a down year by their standards. That loss to Pittsburgh kind of brought the Knights back down to earth a little bit, considering that back, I believe it was in 2015, they were 0-12. They were 6-17 in 2016. In 2017, under Scott Frost, they really took off. This 9-3 season kind of brought them back to reality, but still a record that many teams in the American and many teams across the nation would have killed for. They lost to Pittsburgh, they lost to Cincinnati, they lost to Tulsa. They now find themselves back in a decent bowl game in the Gasparilla Bowl, but back down to earth and not playing in a New Year's Six bowl game, which I'm sure for many fans across the nation is very good to hear. For Marshall, they finished the year 8-4, and like Central Florida, not a bad mark at all, but maybe a little bit by the Thundering Herds standards. But when you look at the way the season started for them, I would be thrilled with an 8-4 record. Marshall kicking off the year with a 2-3 record. Remember, two of those losses coming to Boise State and Cincinnati, so very good group of 5 out-of-conference opponents for Marshall. But 2-3, but ended up winning 6 of their final 7 games to make their 3rd straight bowl game. So Marshall looking really good and really peaking at the right time coming in to this 2019 postseason. We'll take a look at the statistics here and kind of take a look at what to expect when you watch Central Florida and Marshall. I think most people kind of took their eyes off the Knights when they lost to Pittsburgh. When they fell out of the national spotlight and were no longer in the running for the New Year's Six bowl spot, when they were no longer in the running for yet another undefeated regular season, I think a lot of people kind of forgot about them. But they were still putting up some very good numbers. And when you look at the stats, they are way better than Marshall. They blow the Thundering Herd out of the water. UCF is averaging 43 points per game. 43 points per game compared to Marshall's 25.8 points per game. The Knights are also averaging 536.6 yards per game. And what has impressed me the most about UCF is not the numbers that they're putting up, not the way they have blown out the majority of their opponents. It's the fact that they've done all that under some worse circumstances, under some circumstances that most teams don't have to deal with. We knew that Central Florida was going to be without McKenzie Milton coming into 2019, the star quarterback for the Knights back in 2017 and for the majority of 2018 before he went down with a terrible, terrible leg injury. But they brought in their transfer quarterback in Brandon Wimbush, transferring from Notre Dame. They had Daryl Mack, who played in the conference championship game against Memphis last year, who played against LSU in the Fiesta Bowl. So they had 2 experienced quarterbacks lined up, and they both go down with injuries. They both go down, so now they turn to freshman quarterback Dylan Gabriel, and I think a lot of people thought the season was shot. And all Dylan Gabriel's done as a freshman is throw for nearly 3,400 yards, 27 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions. So the numbers he has put up, kind of gotten just thrown out into the action, has been unbelievable. And I credit a lot to Gabriel for that, but I give a lot of credit to Josh Heupel and his coaching staff for being able to adjust and adapt to the situation they were dealt. And they have really, in my opinion, adjusted perfectly. Now, granted, Gabriel is not the only person that you have to credit the success to. Central Florida has thrived with a 3-headed monster at running back, led by Otis Anderson, their leading rusher, but also Greg McCray and Adrian Killens. All of those guys have key experience in some big-time games and a key experience in the postseason. Of course, none bigger than New Year's Six bowl games. So that's obviously an edge that UCF is going to have over their opponent in Marshall. And finally, we talked about the quarterback, we talked about the running back. Look at one of the best wide receivers in the entire country, Gabriel Davis for the Knights. declared for the NFL draft early, so there were questions as to whether or not he'd be playing in this Gasparilla Bowl, but he came out and said he will play, which is a huge boost for them. If not, I think that'd be a huge boost for Marshall. Maybe that spread of 17 points would drop a little bit. But Gabriel Davis, 72 receptions, over 1,200 yards receiving, 12 touchdowns, setting the Central Florida single-season reception record. And the fact that he'll be out there on the field for one final time for the Knights gives this offense a huge, huge boost. Now for Marshall, we haven't forgotten about them. So much to talk about with Central Florida, but we have not forgotten about the Thundering Herd. They are led by another great quarterback in sophomore Isaiah Green, was one of the best quarterbacks in the Conference USA last year and put up some great numbers this year. Over 2,200 passing yards, 14 touchdowns, but 9 interceptions. The number of interceptions and turnovers that Green has committed is a little concerning going up against this Central Florida defense. And while he has played great last year, while he's been a great kind of bit of stability for this Marshall offense in 2019, they don't use him as much. They really are more of a run-heavy team. You've got Brendan Knox, guys, for the Thundering Herd, putting up over 1,200 rushing yards this season, nearly 1,300 rushing yards and 11 touchdowns. So that's going to be the key in this one, is Marshall trying to continue to get that passing game going with Knox and really seeing if UCF will be able to shut down that rushing attack. And when you look at the defenses, guys, we have two very underrated defenses here. Marshall usually boasting a solid one. I would say that the Thundering Herd usually have one of the better defenses in the Conference USA. They're allowing just 23.1 points per game this year. And UCF, everybody wants to talk about the firepower they have offensively. They're allowing just 22.8 points per game. So that's a really important stat here, guys. And really important considering that Marshall does not have that explosive of an offense. 25.8 points per game that Marshall is scoring on average. So the fact that Marshall is not racking up the points and that UCF is shows me that Marshall's going to have to rely heavily on their defense in this game, and that UCF might be able to, control this game the way they want it to be. They can control the tempo offensively, and their defense is good enough to force some stops and some errors from this Thundering Herd offense. So you've looked at the offense, you've looked at the defense, you've kind of looked at some key storylines here. One common trend I have found that really influenced our pick in this game, and really something that you look at the key for in this game, goes all the way back to UCF, and it goes all the way back to their 3 losses that they were dealt this season, to Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, and Tulsa. UCF, those 3 losses all came away from home. This game, the Gasparilla Bowl, not going to be a home game for the Knights, of course. Those 3 losses came by a combined 7 points. So they were very, very close once again to having yet another undefeated regular season and finding themselves in their 3rd straight New Year's Six bowl game. In those 3 losses, Central Florida allowed an average of 175.7 rushing yards per game. So nearly 200 rushing yards per game. That is bad news going up against a Marshall team with Brendan Knox and a dual threat quarterback in Isaiah Green that could be able to dominate UCF on the ground, if that is the case and UCF has not adjusted any defensively. Also, in those 3 losses, UCF had 9 total turnovers. That turned into 24 points total for their opponents over those 3 games. They lost the 3 by a combined 7, had 9 turnovers, 24 points came out of them. Huge difference makers in those one-possession games. So keep that in mind, guys. Well, the key for this game for UCF is to not beat themselves. They've got to be able to convert in the red zone. They've got to be able to take care of the football. Don't give the ball away, because I guarantee Marshall's going to be able to capitalize off of them, much like Tulsa, Cincinnati, and Pittsburgh did. And lastly, UCF just has to stop the run. If they can stop the run, I do not think that Isaiah Green can win this game solely through the air for the Thundering Herd. They just don't have enough talent and speed to go up against and match UCF stride for stride, especially if this game were to turn into a shootout or a fairly high-scoring game. And that is why we are picking UCF in this game. That is why we were going with the Knights. I'm expecting a relatively close game at first, maybe all the way through the first half. I certainly believe that the Marshall defense keeps the Thundering Herd in this one, and I firmly believe that they're able to get some points on the board from their rushing game. And I think that's going to catch UCF a little bit off guard, and that's why I see it being maybe a one-possession game going into halftime. But in the second half, Central Florida pulls away. They were able to shut down that run game. Dillon Gabriel has a phenomenal game. More than anything, Gabriel Davis has a phenomenal game, improving that draft stock going into the 2020 NFL Draft. Central Florida pulls away late in the second half or midway through the second half in a game that, as many are calling it, is a bit of a mismatch. Obviously, statistically, Central Florida owns the edge. I believe they own the edge in terms of the strength of schedule, which will benefit them here. They own the edge when it comes to postseason experience, and the Knights will win this game and clinch a 10-win season, which would be their third straight year that they have double-digit wins on the year. So that dates back to the Scott Frost era, but keep in mind that 2 of those have come under Josh Heupel. So all the credit in the world to the Knights, all the credit in the world to the Thundering Herd for getting yet another 8-win season, but Central Florida is going to win one of the weirdest games of the 2019 postseason, the Gasparilla Bowl presented by Bad Boy Mowers. But don't miss it. The only football game we've got Monday, the day before Christmas Eve. So guys, thank you so much for watching us here on YouTube. Make sure to check out everything in the description below. Like this video. Look at the exclusive college football content and offers we have for you. The spread pick for this Gasparilla Bowl and all the other bowl games can be found over at the Gridiron Expert, so do not miss out on that. And as always, thank you for watching. Please continue to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time on the Gridiron Expert.